Go sleep on the couch. Those 4 words cut through the air in our kitchen when I asked why her brother, who'd been living with us for free, never helped with the bills. That night, Amanda chose Kyle, and I became a stranger in my own home. What started as a temporary favor for her brother turned into the conflict that destroyed our marriage. Let me tell you how we got here. But first, tell me where you're watching this story from. I'd love to know just how far this is reaching. My name is Brian Cooper. I'm 37 years old, and I work as a machine operator at an auto factory here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Amanda and I had been married for 8 years. She worked as a lab technician at the local hospital. Our life was simple, but it worked. We had a house in the suburbs, bills paid on time, plans for the future. We had our routine, our quiet moments after work. It was a calm life, no big dramas or complications, until everything changed on a rainy Tuesday in March. Kyle Sanders showed up at our door carrying a worn-out backpack and a story about losing his job. Amanda didn't hesitate for a second. "It's just temporary," she said, while setting up the guest room for her brother. He was 27, always jumping from job to job, living off odd gigs when he got lucky. Amanda always had a soft spot for Kyle, like a protective older sister. Back then, I even thought that kind of family loyalty was admirable. Little did I know what was coming. The first few weeks were fine. Kyle helped out a bit, promised he'd find another job soon. But as days went by, those promises turned into excuses that got more and more creative. Our electric and water bills started going up. The fridge was always empty. There were dirty dishes piled up waiting for someone to clean. Kyle had a gift for disappearing whenever there was housework to do. Amanda didn't seem to notice these things. Or maybe she did and just chose to ignore them. Almost 11 months went by and Kyle had fully settled into our routine. He slept in late, played on my console, ate our food, acted like he was paying rent. Every time I brought it up with Amanda, I got the same answer. I was being insensitive to someone who was going through a rough patch. The tension started to build slowly, like a crack you only notice when it's already a hole in the wall. I still had no idea that I was about to find out where my wife's priorities really were. It was a Friday when I finally decided I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Kyle was eating the chicken Amanda had just bought when I brought up the issue that had been eating at me for months. "Kyle, man, you've been here almost a year now. How about pitching in with the bills?" The question came out more blunt than I intended. His fork froze midair, and silence filled the table. Amanda looked at me with that expression I knew all too well, as if I had just kicked a puppy right in front of her. Kyle let out a dry laugh and shook his head, like I had just told the lamest joke ever. "Seriously, Brian? I'm going through a tough time and you're asking me for money?" He waved his hands around, dramatic as always. "I help in my own way, man. It's not all about money." The arrogance in his voice left me speechless for a second. Help in his own way? Have you ever had someone in your house who helps in their own way but never spends a single dime? I could feel this clash with my brother-in-law spilling over into my marriage fast, but I still tried to keep my cool. That's when Amanda stepped in, and it wasn't on my side. "Brian, you can't pressure him about that right now. Kyle's doing his best," she said in that protective tone she always used when it came to her brother. "He'll get back on his feet, he just needs more time." More time? I stared at her in disbelief, realizing that my own wife had just undercut me in my own house. At that moment, it became crystal clear that she had chosen her brother over supporting her husband. The loyalty I had counted on simply wasn't there. "Go sleep on the couch." The words came out of Amanda's mouth like a final verdict. Kyle smirked, went back to eating like nothing had happened, and I just stood there trying to process what had just gone down. In 15 minutes, I had gone from being the reasonable one to being the bad guy, just for suggesting that a grown man should pitch in for the bills in the house he lived in for free. I grabbed my pillow and blanket, and for the first time in 8 years of marriage, I slept on my own couch. That night, staring at the living room ceiling, a bitter truth started to sink in. I spent the whole night wide awake on that couch, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of a house I knew by heart. Every noise felt louder, like the house itself was reminding me that I no longer belonged in my own home. My mind kept replaying that dinner scene, the mocking laugh from Kyle, Amanda's disappointed look, and those cold words that sent me to the couch. How did we even get to this point? During those lonely hours, I started connecting dots I'd been ignoring for months. The times Amanda brushed things off whenever I mentioned the higher bills. How she always changed the subject when Kyle disappeared with cash from the emergency jar we kept in the kitchen. The knowing looks they exchanged when they thought I wasn't paying attention. The way she always had an excuse ready to defend anything her brother did. Had I been too naive? Or did I just not want to see the reality that had been right in front of me? The feeling of having lost my place in my own marriage settled in like a weight on my chest. When was the last time Amanda ever defended me? When was the last time she chose my side in an argument? I tried to remember, but all I could think of were the times she prioritized Kyle's comfort over ours. It was like I had turned into a tenant in my own life, paying the bills but without a say. That realization hurt more than any argument we could have had. As the night dragged on, a strange kind of curiosity started gnawing at me. If Kyle had been unemployed for over a year, how did he manage to get money for cigarettes, for beer on weekends, for those mysterious outings he went on? Amanda always said he was getting by, but she never explained exactly how. I started thinking about our finances, about the bank statements I hadn't checked in a while because I trusted Amanda with them. A sick feeling grew in my gut. Maybe there were things I needed to look into. When the first ray of sunlight came through the living room window, I had already made a silent decision. I wasn't going to keep living like a stranger in my own house, walking on eggshells so I wouldn't upset the permanent house guest. I needed to know exactly what was happening with our money, with our bills, with all those expenses I hadn't been seeing. If Amanda and Kyle had secrets, it was time to find out what they were. That sleepless night drained every last bit of patience I had. Amanda's alarm went off at 6 in the morning, same as always. I heard her moving around in the bedroom, getting ready for work as if nothing had happened the night before. Kyle was still snoring. I stayed on the couch pretending to sleep, but my mind was already racing. There was a lot I needed to check, and Amanda leaving the house was going to be the perfect chance to start. Some truths can't be avoided anymore, and I could feel I was about to uncover one that would change everything. As soon as Amanda left for work and Kyle went back to snoring, I got up from the couch with a clear mission in my head. I went straight to our bedroom, where we kept the computer and all the paperwork for the bills. Amanda always handled the finances, and I never questioned it much. I trusted her completely. But now, staring at that pile of bank statements, I realized just how careless I'd been. I started opening the most recent envelopes, and right away something caught my eye. There were cash withdrawals I had no memory of making. The statements showed a pattern of constant withdrawals. $200 here, $300 there, always from ATMs I never used. The dates matched the weekends when Kyle went out to take care of some things and came back with beer and cigarettes. My stomach turned as I flipped through months and months of statements. This wasn't just an occasional bit of help. It was practically a monthly paycheck for my wife's brother. The financial betrayal was right there, black and white on paper. I grabbed my phone and called Amanda at work, trying to keep my voice calm. "Amanda, I need to talk to you about some account activity." The silence on the other end lasted forever. "What account activity, Brian?" Her voice sounded different, more careful. "The cash withdrawals, a bunch of them. Can you explain those?" I could hear her breathing on the other end, trying to figure out what to say. Finally, she sighed. "We'll talk about this when I get home." "No, Amanda. We're talking about this now." By that moment, my patience was completely gone. "How much money have you given Kyle?" The silence came back, but this time I didn't back down. "Talk to me. How much?" She tried to play it down at first. "It was just a few small helps. He promised to pay it back. You don't understand what he's going through." But I kept pushing until she finally admitted part of it. 500 here, 700 there. Always with the promise that it would be the last time. The problem was it was never the last time. When I pressed for the total amount, Amanda finally cracked. "About 5,000, maybe 5.5. I'm not exactly sure. $5,000. Our money, secretly handed over to her brother while I was busting my back at the factory." $5,000, Amanda? In a year? Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "But Brian, he's my family." Family. That word she used as a shield to justify every bit of nonsense. At that moment, I felt something break inside me, and it wasn't anger. It was something deeper. The trust that took us years to build had fallen apart in a 10-minute phone call. It wasn't just about the money. It was the lies, the deception, the feeling of being treated like a fool in my own house. "Amanda, I can't do this anymore." The words came out before I could even think. "I can't live like this." She tried to say something, but I had already hung up. I just stood there holding the phone, staring at the bank statement spread out on the bed. It wasn't $5,000. It was $12,000. 12. In secret. A whole year of lies. A wife who chose to protect her brother instead of respecting her husband. In that moment, a strange kind of clarity came over me. There was nothing left to talk about. No more room to try and work things out. Kyle could keep living there for free, and Amanda could keep funding him. But it wasn't going to be with my money, and it wasn't going to be in my house. I grabbed my wallet, my keys, and walked out of that house without looking back. There were some urgent things I needed to take care of, and the first was making sure I would never spend another night on that couch. A quiet kind of revenge started to take shape in my mind. It wouldn't be through yelling, insults, or making a scene. It would simply be by removing myself, my money, and my support from a situation that clearly didn't value me. Amanda wanted to choose her brother. Fine. Now she could deal with the consequences of that choice on her own. As I drove through the streets of Tulsa, a strange feeling of freedom began to grow in my chest. I stopped at a red light and glanced at the clock. It was 9 in the morning on an ordinary Monday, but I knew my life was about to change completely. Amanda still thought we'd come home that night and have a little talk about the withdrawals. She had no idea I had already made the most important decision of the last 8 years. Some bridges, once they burn, leave you free to find better paths. By around 10 o'clock, I was already at a real estate office looking for apartments to rent. The agent showed me a few places, small but clean and organized. "I can sign today," I said, surprising even myself with the determination in my voice. He looked at me curiously but didn't ask anything. Some decisions you make with your head, others with your heart. This one I was making with something much deeper, the need to take back my dignity. 3 hours later, I was signing the lease for a small but practical apartment on the other side of town. The landlord agreed to let me move in that same day. Cash in hand can work miracles, even in Tulsa. I called my supervisor at the factory and asked for the rest of the week off, making up a family emergency. Technically, it wasn't a lie. I left the real estate office with the keys in hand and this strange feeling, like I was finally waking up from a year-long nightmare. For the first time in months, I was making a decision that was mine alone. I went back home knowing exactly what I needed to do. Amanda was still at work, Kyle was still asleep, the same routine as always. I only grabbed what was essential: clothes for a week, important documents, a few personal items that actually mattered to me. I left behind everything that was ours, everything Amanda could claim as hers too. I didn't want to fight, didn't want an argument over who owned what. All I wanted back was my freedom. I packed my things into 2 suitcases and 3 boxes. 8 years of marriage fitting into the trunk of a Honda Civic. You'd think that would make me sad, but instead it just made me feel relieved. I grabbed a sheet of paper and wrote a short, straight-to-the-point note. "Amanda, I don't work to support your brother. There's nothing left to talk about. Don't contact me, Brian." I left the note on the bed, right next to the bank statements I had spread out. Let her see with her own eyes the proof of what she'd done. Some truths need to be written, not spoken. Kyle woke up while I was carrying the second-to-last box to the car. He showed up at the door in his pajamas, looking like he had no clue what was going on. "Man, what are you doing?" I stopped, looked at him for a few seconds, and felt this huge urge to say everything I thought about his freeloading existence. But I didn't say anything nasty. I just smiled and said, "I'm giving you guys more space, Kyle. Make the most of it." The confusion on his face was almost funny. He didn't know yet that he had just lost his sponsor. The husband leaves home taking only what he needs to start over, and that's exactly what I did. I closed the trunk, took one last look at the house I had lived in for 5 years, and felt this strange sense of freedom. There were no tears, no drama, just the cold certainty of someone who has made a necessary decision. Kyle stood there in the doorway, probably trying to figure out if this was temporary or final. He'd find out soon enough that it was very final. I arrived at my new apartment just as the sun was setting. It was small, but clean. 2 rooms, an open-plan kitchen, a working bathroom, and basic furniture. After a year of sharing space with Kyle, that place felt like a palace. I started unpacking slowly, no rush, putting every single item in its place. For the first time in a long while, I was doing something entirely for myself, on my own time, my own way. No one to please, no one to satisfy, no one judging my choices. When I finished setting up the basics, I sat on the couch that came with the apartment and grabbed my phone. 17 missed calls from Amanda, 12 text messages I had zero interest in reading. They went from confusion, "Brian, where are you?" to desperation, "Please come back home." I turned the phone off and put it in a drawer. Amanda had chosen her brother over her husband. Now she could deal with the consequences of that choice without dragging me into it. The peace that washed over me in that moment was something I hadn't felt in over a year. I made a simple sandwich in the tiny kitchen and ate in silence, listening only to the sound of traffic outside. No Kyle snoring in the next room, no Amanda making excuses for hidden expenses, no tension in the air just waiting to explode. Just me, my food, and the relief of not having to pretend everything was fine. For the first time since Kyle showed up at our door, I was able to have a meal in peace. It felt like a luxury I'd almost forgotten existed. That night, lying in a bed that was mine alone, I stared at the ceiling and thought about how much had changed in just 12 hours. In the morning, I was a betrayed, disrespected husband sleeping on my own couch. By nighttime, I was a free man in a small but honest apartment. Silent justice was already at work. No yelling, no insults, no drama. Just the natural consequences of their choices finally catching up to them. Amanda wanted to bankroll her brother? Perfect. Now she could do that with her own paycheck. I closed my eyes and, for the first time in months, slept through the entire night without waking up. No Kyle snoring. No worrying about bills I didn't know were paying for my brother-in-law. No feeling like an outsider in my own life. In the middle of the night, I woke up for a few seconds and smiled to myself in the dark. Amanda was probably awake at that very moment, trying to figure out how she had lost both a husband and the financial cushion that kept her brother afloat, all in the same day. Some lessons only sink in when your wallet feels it. The next morning, I woke up slow, made myself a simple cup of coffee, and looked out the window of my new apartment. Tulsa was still the same city, but I felt different, as if I had broken out of a prison I had built for myself. The phone was still off in the drawer, and Amanda was probably panicking, trying to track me down. But I had no urgency to fix any of it. After a year of being ignored and disrespected, they could wait for me on my terms. This silent kind of revenge had only just begun, and it wasn't going to be loud or confrontational. It would be carried out simply by my absence. Without my income, without my support, without my presence to absorb all the problems Kyle caused, they would have to face reality on their own. I had spent months trying to make Amanda see that Kyle was taking advantage of our generosity. Now she could learn that lesson firsthand, when there was no one left to share the financial and emotional burden of supporting a grown man who refused to grow up. 5 days later, someone knocked on my apartment door with a kind of insistence I recognized immediately. It was Amanda. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing there, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was messy, her eyes red, a version of her that looked nothing like the always put-together lab technician I used to know. For a few seconds, I thought about not opening the door, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see just how far she was willing to go to try and turn things around. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Brian, thank God I found you." The words came rushing out of her mouth like she had rehearsed them on the way over. "We need to talk, please. You can't just disappear like that." She tried to step inside, but I didn't move out of the doorway. I just shook my head and waited for her to keep talking. Amanda was clearly desperate, her eyes wide, her hands trembling slightly. It was a side of her I had never seen before. The woman who always had everything under control now looked completely lost. "Kyle's gone, Brian." The words came out low, almost like a confession. 3 days after you left, he packed up his stuff and disappeared. No note, nothing, he just vanished. I couldn't stop a small smile from forming at the corner of my mouth. Kyle had done exactly what I knew he would. Once the easy money dried up, he bolted somewhere else. The brother Amanda had defended so fiercely just abandoned her at the first sign of trouble. The irony was almost poetic, but I kept my face neutral. And that's not all, she went on, her voice getting more frantic with every word. He left a bunch of debts behind. Credit cards I didn't even know existed. Loans he took out in my name, bills he promised to pay but never did. Amanda started crying right there at my door, and for the first time in a week, I felt a flicker of something like pity. But it was just a flicker. She had chosen to protect Kyle instead of trusting me. Now she was reaping exactly what she had sown. The freeloading brother had turned into a full-blown financial nightmare. Amanda wiped her tears with the back of her hand and tried to pull herself together. The debts add up to almost $15,000, Brian. $15,000. He used my name, my social security number, my trust to get credit all over the place. Her voice was breaking, but she kept going. Collectors are calling every day. There are threats of default, and some bills are going into collections next week. I listened in silence, processing how Kyle had managed to be even worse than I thought. It wasn't enough to be a leech. He had become a household criminal and stolen from his own sister. Amanda was finally learning the hard way exactly what kind of person she had chosen to defend over me. Please, Brian, I need your help to fix this mess. She reached out a hand as if to touch me, but I instinctively stepped back. I know I messed up. I know I should have told you about the money, but can you help me get out of this? We always solved everything together. That last line irritated me more than I expected. Together? She had secretly given her brother $12,000 and was now finding out he had racked up another $15,000 in her name. And now she had the nerve to ask me to clean up the mess? If it weren't so sad, it would almost be funny. I let her talk for a few more minutes, listening to every plea, every promise that things would be different, every apology mixed with requests for financial help. Amanda was completely broken, not just financially, but emotionally as well. The brother she had protected so fiercely had walked out of her life, leaving behind nothing but debts and problems. She tried to convince me that Kyle had taken advantage of her too, as if that could change anything, as if she hadn't chosen to secretly give him money for an entire year. When she paused to breathe, I looked straight into her eyes. I asked if she had any idea what she was really asking me. My voice came out calm, almost like an explanation. She wanted me to go back home and take on debts I had no part in, debts created by a man she defended every time I warned her about his character. She started to say something, but I stopped her. She wanted me to pay the price for her decision to trust Kyle instead of trusting me. Each word came out measured, without anger, just facts laid out with absolute clarity. The expression on Amanda's face slowly changed, from hope to despair, and then to something that looked like painful realization. She said she didn't know he was going to do this, that he promised he would pay the money back, that he promised he would get a job. I shook my head slowly. I reminded her that I had warned her many times. She chose not to believe me. Silence settled between us for several long seconds. It was as if she finally understood that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. I told her that now she probably felt betrayed, that now she was finally realizing that Kyle had taken advantage of her kindness, of her loyalty to family, that now she could see he had never planned on giving back everything they did for him. She nodded, and tears filled her eyes again. And then I asked her to imagine how I felt when I discovered that my own wife had been betraying me financially for a year. To imagine what it was like to find out she had chosen to protect someone who was robbing us. The silent revenge had been completing itself all along without me needing to raise my voice. I stepped back and held the door. I told her she had made her choices. She chose to give our money to Kyle in secret. She chose to send me to the couch when I confronted her. She chose to side with him when I asked for her support. I told her that I had tried, but she had refused to listen. My voice remained controlled, but every word carried the weight of months of accumulated disrespect. Now she would have to face the consequences of those choices, alone. She tried to say something else, but I was already closing the door. There were no more buts. She had broken our trust, and trust can't be fixed. I closed the door gently, but firmly. I heard her knock a few more times, calling my name, begging me to reconsider, promising she would change everything. But I didn't answer. I sat down on my couch and waited until the sound of her steps faded down the hallway. Through the window, I saw her get into her car and sit there for about 15 minutes before leaving, probably crying and trying to process the fact that her last hope was gone. Amanda had finally understood that some decisions have permanent consequences. The freeloading brother had vanished, the husband who supported the house was gone, and now she was alone with $20,000 worth of problems she had created herself by choosing to protect the wrong person. 8 months have gone by since that conversation at my apartment door, and my life has found a rhythm I didn't even know was possible. I wake up when I want, have my coffee without rushing, go to work at the factory and come back to a home that's truly mine. No more Kyle hogging my console, no more Amanda making excuses for hidden expenses, no more tension hanging in the air every time I open my mouth. It's a simple life, but it's an honest one. I've rediscovered the pleasure of being at peace with myself. The bills for my small apartment fit perfectly into my paycheck. There isn't much left over, but nothing essential is missing either. It's amazing how much cheaper life gets when you're not supporting a freeloading brother-in-law and a wife lying about money. On weekends, sometimes I go out for a beer with the guys from the factory. Sometimes I just stay in reading or watching something. Simple pleasures, but they're my pleasures. I don't have to ask permission from anyone. Don't have to explain how I spend my money. Don't have to pretend things are fine when they're not. Through a mutual acquaintance, I heard that Amanda lost the house. The debts Kyle left behind, combined with losing my income, were too much for her lab tech salary. She had to move into a much smaller apartment and, from what I've been told, she's now working 2 jobs just to keep up with the bills. Kyle never showed up again. He completely vanished from her life after the money ran out. The brother she defended so fiercely just disappeared when it came time to take real responsibility. I don't feel satisfaction or pity hearing that. It's just the natural consequence of the choices that were made. Amanda chose to bankroll her brother instead of respecting her husband, chose lies instead of honesty, chose to send me to the couch instead of standing by me. Kyle chose to be a parasite instead of a responsible man. And I chose my dignity over accepting disrespect. Everyone got exactly what they sowed. Life has that kind of silent justice that sometimes takes a while, but it never fails. Looking back, I realize this might have been the best thing that could have ever happened to me. Sometimes you have to lose a few things to discover what's really worth holding on to. And for me, I found out that my peace of mind is worth far more than any relationship built on lies and disrespect. And now, to you who followed this story of how my wife chose her brother over her own husband, and how it destroyed our marriage. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you were supporting someone who was just taking advantage of your generosity? How would you react if you found out that the person you trusted most had been secretly handing over your money to a lazy relative? Share your stories in the comments about family conflicts that ended up hurting your relationships. And if this story of silent family revenge hit you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every day I bring you real stories of men who faced financial betrayals, freeloading brothers-in-law, and the moment when a husband decides to leave home in search of his dignity. Stay strong on your own path. Truth and justice always find their way, even if they come through silence.